Welcome to Bite-Sized Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, and welcome back to another episode of Bite-Sized Bios, BSB. This is episode number 34, I do believe, of the BSBs. We are covering Harry S. Truman this week. We are going to do a deep dive into a bite-sized dive of this man's life. But before we do that, as is customary with the podcast here, because this is the mini episode accompaniment of HDTH, we have to go back into time and talk about the previous episode from last week, which of course was episode 76 of HDTH, which was about Russia. Good old mother Russia. Learned a lot about Russia because I don't know. I didn't know anything about Russia before at all. Nothing. And it actually, I learned and like with most things, you learn and you have more compassion. I have a little bit more compassion for the Russian people. None for Putin. If anyone's asking, still none for you, bud. But the Russian people and their plight and their cause as a whole. And I had someone put it to me pretty well about Russia. It's just like, this seems like the people have always been somewhat dissatisfied with their government, which a lot of people are, but I mean, in different countries, but it feels like they have always but they've had to go through so many different types. We talked about that kind of, in the last episode with them having to deal with the transition from serfdom, which then led to the workers banding together and creating their own councils vis-a-vis the Soviets, which, and then they all started communism, and now we have the Soviet Union. Like, I mean, that's a lot of shifting to do. There was a kingdom, for a while, for hundreds of years. Imagine, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of turmoil to go through. Yeah, it's a lot of turmoil to go through. And so, I don't know. Like I said, I think there truthfully will be a Russia part 2. Because what I want to do is like deep dive into the specific different revolutions, and talk about maybe like what specifically happened and like really, really break those down and kind of take, the next Russia 2 to kind of take maybe like look at the Russian Revolution, which it'll help because there's still more coming down the pike, for the bite-sized bios. We're going to attack some really, intense individuals here coming soon. All people who play are power players in the 40s to 70s, some of which being Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin. Those people who, the more research we do about them, I feel like we'll also paint a larger picture of just this entire process. And I'm really enjoying what we're doing since we're on the topic of it. I like the fact that just sit here and just go into just, pick a time and just dissect it and just say, oh, I like that person, or this event is interesting. Let's look into that. Oh, the same thing we just talked about 2 weeks ago, that kind of plays into, and I think it's working well. But yeah, I don't know if there's much to say about the Russia episode that was missed, especially since we're going to do a Russia 2, which I do think will happen within the 40 to 70 theme. Like, it probably will show up in the next month or two, if not 3 months, sometime maybe in the fall. Because like I said, this is going to be, we may do this for the rest of the year. And obviously not, didn't change it up, as maybe the new year. But since we're on it, man, might as well just deep dive on it, Might as well just get in there. Yeah, so let's see. I mean, there were mad revolutions we found out for the Russians, just so many. February Revolution, October Revolution, just Russian Revolution as a whole, and the Russian Civil War, which I feel like is something that probably could also even be its own episode, but will definitely be covered more in depth in Russia too, because that truthfully is what gets us the Soviet Union. If it wasn't for the Russian Civil War, I don't think we would have had the Soviet Union. Also, like I said before, when with the czars and stuff. If it wasn't for these certain, like the Decembrist revolution back in the early 1800s, if it wasn't for them to kind of spark that first, kind of fire, ignite a fire there to make people be like, hey, we don't love what we're seeing here, and maybe we can do something about it, is very important. Because without that, you just, nobody does anything. So yeah, we're gonna go back into, because I wanted to get because Russia is so vast, just like the country, the people, it's the timelines. There's so much. So I wanted to kind of get just an overall, in the last one. Then in this next one, I think I'll come back and just kind of dot and pick some pieces. But yeah, so that's been that, of course. As always, you can find all the extras over at htthappen.com 7 days a week. We have the pictures and the videos and the works cited for all that good stuff. Try to keep it updated, but it is a bear to kind of get it done. But I keep coming back, weekly, trying to add some stuff there to kind of keep it fresh somewhat. Let's see. Bite Size Bios, like I said, comes out every Monday at 4:30. So does How Did That Happen? I think if there's anything else you guys need to hear before we start the episode. I'm not really sure. I don't think so. So without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws his power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
Okay, we are here today to talk about Harry Truman. Harry Truman, heavy on the S, that Harry S. Truman. He was born in Lamar, Missouri on May the 8th, 1884, and he was the oldest child of John Anderson Truman and Martha Ellen Young Truman. He was named for his maternal uncle, Harrison, Harry. The middle initial, which we talked about just a little bit ago, is actually doesn't really stand for anything. It's just an abbreviation that goes, I guess you could say it's just for, there's a few people in their name, in their family who have I think it's S names, or just because they wanted to kind of symbolize for people in their family, they just put an S. It's just Harry S. Truman. I think that's weird. But yeah, so it honors his grandfather, Anderson Ship Truman. Oh, here we go. Solomon Young. Yeah, so these two dudes with S's they just kind of picked, but didn't give him either one of the names. Huh. Okay, not going to get stuck on that. So let's see. Truman, he would spend a lot of his time, a lot of his life in Missouri. Man loved Missouri. I've never been there, and I don't particularly want to go, but I know that's a lie. That's a full-blown lie, because I often forget. I'm a Cardinals fan, and Cardinals, the St. Louis is in Missouri, but I've never been, and I don't think of St. Louis when I think of Missouri. I just don't. But yeah, so his father, John Truman, he was a farmer and livestock dealer, and the family lived in Lamar until Harry was 10 months old, when they moved to a farm near Harrisonville, Missouri, once again, still in Missouri. And they lived there for a while until he was 6, when they would move to Independence, Missouri. And I think I could be wrong. Is that where they filmed that football show on Netflix? I could be wrong. But yeah, so he lived there, and I think, let's see, how long was he there? I think for the long haul. I think he went to school there, like high school and stuff like that. So he was, and I watched a lot of documentaries on this guy. He was an all around, people think unremarkable fellow. Truthfully, for a long time in his life, that was the consensus for most of the stuff that I read about him, which is not something you hear when you hear about the lives of most presidents. He still lived a life, and I think there was one documentary that was going in kind of hard on him. I'm like, this dude was still a war veteran, he would actually end up. He tried to join the military multiple times. He tried to join West Point, but then because he couldn't pass the physical because of his eyes, they wouldn't let him in. But then when the World War I actually came around, he joined the National Guard, and boom, they let him in. So he just was I'm gonna get in the military. Let's see, I think we might have jumped the gun a little bit here. We'll go back to just a little bit of his childhood. It says here he, while living in Independence, he would actually do the Shabbat tasks for his Jewish neighbors. That's kind of cool. Kind of cool. I don't know. I think it's not odd. It's just, I don't know. Religion is there's a lot going on there. But it's just a child. Truman was interested in music, reading, and history, all encouraged by his mother, with whom he was very close. He learned to play the piano at age 7. And he even worked at the 1900 Democratic National Convention in Kansas City. His father was relatively active in the Democratic Party and had friends that were also as well. He was employed briefly in the mailroom of the Kansas City Star, yada, yada, yada. I feel like, that stuff is just not as interesting as the fact that he went to World War I and saw action. He was in one of the more bloody fronts of World War I, which I have respect for. If you've ever looked at, we will at some point do, because we've done a lot of World War II, or at least some stuff that is adjacent, World War II adjacent. But the story of World War One is truly tragic. It is truly just sad. I look at that and I just don't know if I could do it as a man. If I was, around that time, I was of service age. I don't know. You should, if you haven't looked into it, there are a lot of good World War One movies out there. World War Two, and I'm not saying that war is war. I'm just saying World War One just like it was a lot more difficult. So, but he was there. He fought in World War One, and that was actually where he would end up finding networking, if you will. While he was there, he would meet a man. His name Pendergast. I forget his actual first name. Let me look that up and make sure I got that right. I know his last name was Pendergast, but it's either Tom, because what it was is that guy's uncle was actually like this kind of dirty politician guy who was maybe fixing elections and would maybe go to jail for fraud later on, or who knows? Maybe we'll get to that. Yeah. So yeah, his name was Tom Pendergast, but the guy Pendergast, excuse me. But the guy that Truman met was Jim Pendergast. He met him in World War One, and they became friends during that time. So when they came back, they kind of maintained their connection. But actually, when Truman came back from World War One, he would actually marry his high school sweetheart. I believe her name was Bessie. I think it was Bess. And then he would actually open up a clothing store, and did that for a little bit. But then due to, I believe, to the Great Depression, it actually he had to close it down. So he lost that. But his wife's family was independently wealthy, so they were actually doing okay, except for the fact that her whole family thought he was kind of like a failure. And I want to say once again, we are talking about a president, people. We are not just talking about some random guy. This guy he's endearing because, and I think that's why, even after, he lived a life. Also, man lived a life. But even after his presidency, some people, a lot of people liked him, because he's just even in the pictures, you can look at him and be like, okay, he seemed like might be a decent guy. So basically, he loses the furniture store. I believe he has to move in with the family, his wife's family. And during that time, he kind of hits up his old friend, Jim Pendergast, and through that, he gets in touch with his uncle, Tom Pendergast, who, like I said, was not the most non-criminal man you may have ever met. And he basically, you could say different things about it, but he kind of offers Truman a number of different positions that help him move up throughout society, basically. The first one being a judge. He becomes a judge, which is very much due in part to Tom Pendergast. And from there he goes, I believe, if it's not straight there, from there to Senate. There may be a spot in the middle, but he goes to Senate, all on what people believe to be the back of Tom Pendergast, ballot stuffing and stuff like that. Not to mention, I did say earlier, Pendergast would end up going to jail for, I think, a year and a half for fraud and just not being, an altogether right fellow. But yeah, so he would get into the Senate, and to his credit, I'm not making it seem like he didn't accomplish things, but it's just he didn't get there. A lot of people didn't think that he got there on his own merit, and he was said to be in the Senate. In the Senate, they said he had come from. What did they say? He was the senator of Pendergast or whatever, as if that's where he came from, not like an actual state or anything like that, because they knew that he got there by doing some shaky, some sneaky, behind the scenes kind of stuff. And it must be mentioned as I'm flipping through the notes here, trying to see what is actually the next thing that we're going to cover about him. He didn't go to college. He went to college but never graduated. So that's probably a better way to put it. He went to multiple colleges but never graduated. And he was the first president in the last almost 100 years. I think William McKinley was the last person before him that didn't go to college, and that was about 40 years before that. So at least it's odd when you think about it. There was so many things that were different about this president that it would almost, it's not a surprise, I guess, when you think about it, that he's the one that would end up dropping the atom bomb. And he did so only 4 months after becoming president. That's wild. Could you imagine getting a new job and then, you're cool day 2, day 3, day 4. Matter of fact, you're not even cool because month 2, you were literally in Germany settling the European theater of World War II by yourself. Like, you used to be just vice president, now it's you and Churchill and Stalin, and you're all at Potsdam. And he planted those red flowers and a star right there before everybody got there, just to let you know that the commies mean business. But that's month 2. That's month 2 for you. 2 months after that, you drop the biggest bomb ever dropped in human history on people. and buildings. And you do it twice. Not just once, you do it twice. And you didn't even go to college. I'm impressed. I'm beyond impressed. Truthfully, I am through the roof. My hero, this kind of guy. He also had an assassination attempt on his life. I believe this was in 1950. There were some Puerto Rican nationals that came to the Bailey House in D.C. and tried to kill him, and they did not succeed. But one of Harry Truman's guys got murdered in the process. This was real. This was not, I feel like this stuff doesn't get told in the history books in school. I don't remember hearing about this at all. All I remember hearing about Harry Truman was vice president to FDR, dropped a bomb. Maybe they mentioned he didn't go to college, but I'm not really sure. That's all I really got growing up. I don't even think they told us that the S in the middle wasn't even real. It doesn't even stand for anything. It stands for, I guess, a number of things. Let's see. Harry Truman, Harry S. Truman, assassination attempt. Let's see what we got here. So yeah, this happened, like I said, in 1950, November the 1st. A couple Puerto Rican guys named Oscar Collazo and Grisela Torresola, right? They tried to come at Harry Truman when he was at Blair House, which is an official residence. It's the guest house, of the president, basically. So he was hanging out there because they were renovating the White House. A White House police officer was killed. Rest in peace, Leslie Coffett. So those guys went to jail. Only one of them went to jail. The other one died. So basically, the other one died while trying to kill the White House police officer, who also died. So it was just Oscar Collazo who was left, and Harry Truman is just that nice of a guy that he would end up commuting. He would end up commuting Oscar Collazo's life sentence, which it just wouldn't be me. I'm sorry. I mean, granted, you didn't kill me, but I don't know. I wonder how Leslie Coffett's family feels about that. But this was also, this was during the Puerto Rican independence movement. It's, there's a lot of stuff that we're probably not going to cover in this theme that we have of the 40s and 70s that we're dealing with right now. But this whole stuff goes back to the Spanish-American War. But yeah, so that just to further illustrate the things that this guy has had to deal with. Drop the bomb, almost get murdered. You know what I mean? And then actually, what the last little tidbit I'll leave you here with, which is just because there's so many things about Harry Truman. We will continue to talk about this man because we will do an episode on the atom bomb, and he's just a part of it. That's why I feel like there's still some other stuff we can talk about at different times. But the last thing I'll leave you with is that when he left office, and I did say a lot of people liked him. A lot of people did like him. But when he left office, he had the lowest approval rating, I believe, in the history of presidents. He had lower than Nixon. At the height of Watergate, he had a lower approval rating for the American people than Nixon. I think it was like 22%, something like that. So I say that to say he only was a 2-term president, even though they had passed the, was it the 22nd Amendment that, restricted presidents to only 2 terms. They had passed that while he was in office because FDR died in his bed, and we don't need that on his 4th term. So they're like, we can't do that anymore. But because Truman was kind of there when it happened, he kind of got grandfathered in. They say you could run again if you want to for your 3rd term. He was like, yeah, no, nobody's really feeling that. So he just stepped down. That's an interesting. This man is just full of mysteries. All right, that was another episode of Bite Size Bios. Learned about Harry S. Truman. Learned that S doesn't mean anything at all. It's just S. Sometimes S is just S. Hope you guys liked it. I really, as the more I talked about and learned about this man, I was just fascinated, just downright fascinated, that he could do all of this. I mean, this is one of the last. I don't think it happens anymore. I would be also just as impressed if a man came out of nowhere and just didn't go to college and then became president and was a wartime president hero and all that good stuff. I mean, that would literally. I mean, that's what happened. That's what happened. This guy literally faked it till he made it, and then when he got there, he blew the roof off of it. I mean, no pun intended. That was interesting. But yeah, so I learned a lot about this guy. Like I said, we will continue to cover him and probably 1 or 2 other presidents. Definitely want to cover FDR somewhat. I mean, he gets covered somewhat. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know, a little bit. He's not coming up on a Bite Size Bio anytime soon. But definitely we're trying to just, since we're on this kick, to get as many people as we can done. JFK. We're gonna do a deep dive on the assassination here pretty soon. But yeah, thank you guys for pressing play, coming back from week to week. I really do appreciate it. I do see the downloads from time to time. That like I looked the other day and there was like 15 downloads in a random day, and I was just like, wow, that's really cool. The like 15 different people, or like someone downloading my stuff 15 times. Like I appreciate it. It doesn't go unnoticed. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week with the next How Did That Happen? Oh wait, yeah, and like and subscribe wherever you find this. 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always what is welcome. So, but yeah, thank you. We'll see you guys next week with the next